Confronting someone you really care about can be really difficult and really uncomfortable, but it is the hallmark of a quality and healthy relationship. So here are two things that you really need to consider before you confront someone. One is whether or not you should confront them, and two is how to prepare for when you do confront them. So before you go about confronting someone, there are three things you need to ask yourself. One, are they at an emotionally stable state? Two, are you the right person to confront them? And three, is this actually important or time sensitive? So let's talk about that first question. Are they at an emotionally stable state? Or is it emotionally sensitive for you to bring up this issue or rebuke right now? What you have to say might be right, and it might be important. But in most instances, timing is the most critical factor you have to consider. A person who is angry, frustrated, sad, or afraid is not at the right state of mind to receive criticism, especially if they are suffering or in the middle of an emotionally turbulent time. If you had a friend who was recently harassed or assaulted and they bore an intense hatred towards the assaulter, it would be incredibly inconsiderate and insensitive for you to say that they should forgive them. Perhaps you may be well-intentioned, maybe you want your friend to let go of anger and let go of hatred, but your words would do more harm than good. Your intended goal would not align with the actualized effect. If you had a friend who was marginalized and discriminated by others, and in their indignation said, "My life matters," it would be incredibly inconsiderate and insensitive for you to respond to them by saying, "Hey, all lives matter." You may be right and wanting to correct your friend's statement, but you'd be ignoring the actual problem, which is that of marginalization and discrimination. Your lack of empathy and focus on technicalities would destroy your relationship. If you had a friend whose parent recently passed away and they were filled with grief and sadness, it would be incredibly inconsiderate and insensitive for you to say, "Hey, it's all in God's plan." Or for you to say, "Hey, you shouldn't mourn so much because now they're in heaven with God." See, that's something even Jesus would not do. And we know this from John chapter 11 when Lazarus, the brother of Mary and Martha, passes away. Starting at verse 32, "Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, 'Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.' When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, 'Where have you laid him?' They said to him, 'Lord, come and see.' Jesus wept." So what did Jesus do? He wept and he mourned with Mary, Martha, and the others. He didn't rebuke or admonish them. He empathized and was present with them. See, this is a great example for us to learn in how to address the pain of others. We should seek to understand and meet people where they're at. And I know it's easier to see with loss and sadness, but this applies with anger and rage as well. Now, that's not to say we should meet anger with anger, but rather to recognize it and seek to understand the cause or the reason that led to it. The next question is whether or not we are the right person to confront them. You should only be confronting someone or addressing a sensitive issue if you are directly involved or if you have a close relationship built on trust and compassion. If you're not directly involved, it's really not any of your business. In that case, the problem or issue doesn't affect you. So you should instead focus on your own problems and issues and your own maturity. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus says, "Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' when there is the log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." So instead of judging others, you should focus your time and your energy looking inwardly, looking at yourself to see how you can improve, how you can mature, and how you can grow. The exception would be if you had that close relationship built on trust and compassion. If you are someone that the other person would be willing to be held accountable by or willing to receive rebuke from. Your relationship is key because the other person has to trust you and know that you're coming from a place of kindness, compassion, and understanding. If they know that you're on their side, they'll be much more willing to consider what you have to say, even if it's hard to hear. However, if you don't have a good relationship with them, that confrontation may come off as an attack or as slander. Even if it's well-intentioned, you're going to put the other person in a defensive state. Instead of considering your feedback, they're going to instead defend themselves and think of ways to discredit your claims. The third question is if this is actually important and if this is actually time sensitive. You have to understand, not everyone is on their best behavior all the time. People have good days and bad days, just like you. Plus, you have to factor in the fact that people behave differently based on their surroundings and the people they're with. If you want to confront someone on their behavior, you have to consider whether it's something that occurs sporadically or something that occurs consistently. If it's something sporadic or only occurs a few times, then seek to understand what causes or influences them to behave in that way. It's possible that you may just be addressing an issue that is a side effect or a symptom of something else happening in their life. If it's something consistent, though, take note of when it happens and be exact in describing whenever they exhibit that behavior. This is mainly for later when you confront them, but it's very important for you to have concrete examples for what you want to address, because the other person may not even be aware of it, especially if it's a consistent and repeated habit. And that brings me to timing. Is it truly time sensitive for you to bring this up? If whatever the person is doing is causing immediate harm, then yes, you should confront them sooner than later to slow down or stop the damage to their health, whether that be mental, physical, emotional, financial, or whatever. But if it's not that serious of an issue, or if there's no immediate danger of harm, then I would urge you to be considerate in your timing and to guide them in recognizing their behavior gradually rather than abruptly. Help them to see the consequences of their actions and how they affect the people around them. If they are and continue to stay oblivious, then you may need to be stronger with your stance. But it's generally better to be gentle with confrontation. The Apostle Paul writes to the church in Galatians chapter 6, "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted." So I encourage you to err on the side of gentleness. If they still don't get it, and if they're still oblivious, then schedule a time and be more firm in your words. If you've considered those 3 questions and it's appropriate for you to move forward, then here's what you need to do before you confront someone you really care about or someone who's very close to you. First, prepare references and specific examples of what you want to address. Focus on their actions and how they led to their subsequent consequences. If possible, cite when and where when you bring up these examples. The more specific, the better. This is important because a lack of details makes it seem as though you're generalizing, making assumptions, or gaslighting. If they feel like you're doing any of those things, they're going to think that they're misunderstood and that they're being attacked. The last thing you want is for them to think that you're criticizing them for things that aren't true or didn't happen. Next, if possible, try to note the circumstances that led to whatever you're confronting them about. Help paint the scene as accurately as possible to help them remember what happened. After all, they may remember the events very different from you. And that's why you should try to write down or type up notes of what happened as soon as you can after they happen. Over time, our memory relies more heavily on the emotions we felt rather than the detail of what actually happened. This could easily happen to the person you want to confront, so they may actually remember things very differently from how they panned out. And keep in mind, this could very easily happen to you too. We're all subject to subjective and selective memory. For that reason, try not to rely on just your own experiences. Ask other mutual friends or other people who are also involved so that you can pull together your stories and get an accurate recount of the events that happened. That brings me to the second thing you need to prepare, which is your intentions. Check your intentions and make absolutely sure that they are clear to the person you're confronting. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." Don't confront someone to shame them, guilt trip them, or make yourself feel higher above them or that you're better than them. Instead, do it because you love them. It's so important that they know and that they understand and that they can perceive that you are confronting them because you care about them. Because whenever you bring up the examples, the more concrete they are and the more accounts of them that you have, the more it may come off or feel like an attack that you've been plotting for a long time. And you do not want them to think or feel that way. Because of how formal it may come off as, it may cause them to feel hurt, angry, or even indignant. So you have to remember that by doing this, you are ripping off the Band-Aid. The only reason why you're causing this temporary pain is for their long-term betterment and future well-being. Before I move on to my last point, I just want to clarify something about these examples. Now, you should try to have a lot, try to have them very detailed, but that doesn't mean you should use all of them. I would hope that you only need to reference one, because the only time you should bring in more and more examples into the confrontation is if the other person is stuck in denial and is refusing to admit or to acknowledge what their actions caused. You should only bring up more examples when they continually refuse to accept that their repeated choices led to concrete consequences. So my last point, point number 3, is to have concrete action steps for them to take. You need to have options, proposals, or at least an outline of ways to move forward. Even better would be to have clear expectations and a list of things that you want and hope to happen. Because if you don't have any of these things, you're just complaining about them. You're not being solution-oriented and you're not helping them. This is not to say that you have to have the right or the best answer or even the correct solution for them, but at least put some thought into how this person who you care about can take what you've shared, take what you've said, and turn their life around for the better. After all, as I said in a previous point, the goal of the confrontation is to help them to live better and to improve their well-being. When you're coming up with suggestions, make sure that they're reasonable and that they're doable. Have a desired end result. Just don't impose a timeline or a goal. And here's why. Everyone handles life differently, and everyone has a different capacity for their ability to change different aspects of their life. You should focus on the end goal of wanting them to be happier and healthier, but you should not tell them when and how fast they need to get there. You telling them that they have to get things together by a certain time communicates obligation to you rather than their own responsibility to improving themselves, to improving their own life. We want them to focus on self-edification and not on pleasing you. We want them to correct their behavior for their own sake, because that's how real and lasting change happens. So here's a quick recap. There were 2 main categories of things you need to consider before you confront someone you care about. The first category was considering whether or not you should confront them. You need to ask yourself, are they at a stable emotional state? Are you the right person to confront them? Is this actually important or is it time sensitive? The second category was about preparing for the actual confrontation. First, prepare concrete and specific examples. Second, you need to check your intentions and make sure that they're abundantly clear. Third, and lastly, you need to have concrete action steps for them to take. I know confronting someone that you care about can be really scary because it may feel like your entire relationship is on the line. It may be terrifying to think that if you confront them, they may pull away from you or distance themselves away from you. But if there's someone you really care about and you really want what's best for them, and what you have to say can help them live a happier and better life, then I would say it's within your responsibility as a friend, as a significant other, or as a family member to help them turn their life around, to help them live better. So it may be difficult, but it's not impossible, and it can lead to stronger and better relationships. So good luck, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.